Drums are quite a complex instrument to record because they use multiple microphones, and of course, using multiple microphones means that the sound of the kit is not going to reach all of those mics at the same time. Let's take, for example, a close mic on the snare drum and compare that to an overhead mic or a room mic. The close mic on the snare is going to capture the sound of the snare drum a lot quicker than an overhead or a room mic. And that results in a slight time difference or time delay amongst those mics. So meaning that this can impact what we call the phase relationship from one mic to another. So phase is quite a gnarly topic to delve into, so I'm only going to be covering just the bare basics of it. Whereas if you want to delve into phase a bit more, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there that will shed more light on it. So we're just going to cover the basics of it. So basically, if the phase relationship amongst each of the drum mics is not working as it should be, then this can result in a cancellation of certain frequencies. So let's take the snare drum with the overheads for an example. If our snare is not in phase with the overhead mics, then this can result in our snare sounding thin and hollow because of the lower frequencies dropping out. So you end up with a hollow or thin sounding snare without any body or out any impact to it, which is not what we want. So the first protocol would be just going through and just checking the phase relationships. So we're going to start with the overheads. Overheads are recorded in stereo, so you got left and right channel. And even between the left and right channel, there could be some phasing issues which we'll have to fix. So we'll just check the overheads to make sure. So I just selected those and solo. Just zoom in. And probably the best thing to do is to select a snare hit, which will determine if we're in phase or not. So we can just zoom right in. And judging by that, we're looking pretty good. Both channels seem to be in phase with one another, which is a good start. Let's say, for example, if the right channel is out of phase, the waveform representation will be flipped. So instead of going together with the left channel, it'll kind of be, the reverse of that. So think of it as a tug of war. So both waveforms will be more or less fighting against each other, pulling away, hence the dropout in some of the lower frequencies, as opposed to working together like they are here. So just to confirm that, what we can do, most plugins tend to have a phase invert button on them. So in Logic, we'll just go to our audio effects and go down to utility and click on the gain plugin. Of course, being a stereo recording, we want to click stereo. So there's our phase invert buttons, left and right. So just to clarify that example I just mentioned, if we phase invert the right channel, we've now flipped the phase. So the right channel is going to be working in reverse to the left channel. And this is what it'll sound like. So you notice the difference between the two. So there's nothing we have to do with fixing up the phase with the overheads because everything seems to be all good. So we can just leave that plugin off. So just click on there, just go no plugin. Cool, so now we'll check the overheads. Let's go with our snare. So keep the overheads soloed. And just to really sort of get a bigger picture of matching the snare of the overheads, we can change our overheads to mono. So in Logic, we just go to output. These two circles represent left and right stereo, but if we click on them, we got only one circle now, which is a mono track, and even our meters there have converted to mono. So basically summing it into mono will determine more if there's any phase issues or not. So we'll keep the overhead soloed, and then we'll solo the snare top. So just to the audio effects. With Logic, once you've used one plugin, it'll end up in your recents menu here, so we can just choose the gain plugin from there. But just again to show you where it is, we'll go back down to Utility, select Gain, snare being a mono track, select Mono. Okay, so if we activate the phase invert, let's see what that does to our snare sound with the overheads. So of course, if you're not familiar with checking the phase, then no doubt the first thing you will do is EQ the hell out of your snare, compress it to compensate for that. But really, it's to do with the phase relationship between the overheads and the snare. Cool, so once we've done the snare top and the overheads, we can then compare the snare top and bottom. So I'll solo the snare bottom. Just take solo off the overheads. So let's zoom into one of the hits here. So again, so far it's looking pretty good. Everything looks as though it's working with one another, not against. But again, we'll just confirm that. We'll just go to our gain plugin. Go mono, being a mono track. It's good just to do that a few times, because then your ears will begin to get used to the feel of that and you'll know what you're listening out for. So we'll put that back in phase. Again, there's nothing we have to do with that. And then let's check the relationship with our kick in and kick out. So let's just zoom into one of the hits. Cool, so that looks as though it's in phase with kick in and kick out. Again, there's no opposing issues there in terms of phase relationship. Everything seems to be working accordingly as it should, which is good, but we'll just have a listen just to make sure. And just to sort of note that sort of slight delay in there with the kick in and the kick out, you might think, oh, why can't you just nudge it back? But that can sort of cause different kind of phase issues as well. So it's best just to leave it as it is and keep like the nature of the kit. So let's go with our kick in, audio effects. I can just select gain from up here since I've used it. Go mono. There we are. And let's have a listen to the whole drum mix now. always check your phase with drum recordings for sure, because it will make a huge difference to the sound of the kit, as you've just noticed there. Nothing worse than having a thin sounding snare or a flabby cardboard sounding kick drum. So it takes time just to do those fundamentals, which might seem boring, but it's always the boring stuff that's worth it in the end. So cheers for watching this. Hope this has given you a basic understanding of checking the phase amongst different drums and the results that can be achieved when everything's in phase and working with one another. So I know I said this is going to be part 2, but I'm going to split this into part 3 now. So part 3 we'll get down to editing. So happy producing, and we'll catch you in part 3.